Hello, everyone. This is Belinda Carr, and you're listening to my podcast on building products and technology. As we know, the construction industry is ripe for automation and disruption. It has been reliant on manual labor and outdated tech for far too long, which has led to lagging productivity. Every week, I chat with a company that is exploring ways to tackle these issues. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Benjamin Coorey, founder and CEO of Archistar. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thanks, Belinda. It's great to be here.
So Archistar is a platform to streamline the property development process. The software that you and your team have developed is digital planning to feasibility through automated 3D generative designs. That's a lot of complex buzzwords in that description, but is there a simplified explanation for our listeners?
I appreciate there's quite a few buzzwords in there, but it is quite simple. Essentially, what we're doing at Archistar, we're simply digitizing the planning codes. So whatever the county or the council is telling you can or can't do on a piece of land, and we're basically interpreting that and telling you what is the highest and best use of land. So if you've got a piece of property, based on what you can and can't build, we'll tell you what's the highest and best use, and then we'll show you in 3D with some design options. And that's basically the generative design. So pretty simple, but a lot of advanced tech behind it.
So y'all got started in Australia, but you're soon moving to the US and you're going to be rolling out your software here soon.
That's correct, yeah. So Australia's been a really good, test sandbox for us, because there is different states, there's different councils, and there's a lot of variety that we needed to make our system robust. And we've got some really great traction over there. And we can see that the US is a similar planning system, although just a lot larger, a lot more states, a lot more counties. So we're excited to be launching out in the US.
I'm looking forward to diving into the details of Archistar. But before we do that, let's talk about your background, because you come from an architecture background. Just like me, you have a bachelor's and master's in architecture, but you also got a PhD in philosophy. How did you, that's just a fascinating journey to me, that how has philosophy influenced you running the business, and how does that work with your architecture background?
So actually, my PhD wasn't necessarily in philosophy. It was in generative design. So it's tailored into this. So my background was architecture. But I've always been super interested in how technology can shape the architecture process. And as you're aware, architecture is a very creative process, and there's hand drawing involved, and connecting your brain to the paper and coming up with bespoke and creative designs. I always looked to technology and to see what were the advances that could help streamline that process. And it was just, it may have been coincidence at the time that, developments were happening in technology at that time. And, the big thing there was Coorey Technologies and Digital Project that was coming on the scene. And no one really knew what to do with that. So I had some really good mentors with my professors at uni that said, hey, if you're interested in this, you should start looking at these new technologies coming out. So at that time, Digital Project from Coorey Technologies, Generative Components from Bentley came out, and I kind of just went with the flow and started learning what this could be and all this new technology. And I think that's it's an interesting, if you're passionate about something, I think you've got to seek out where are the opportunities. And at that point, no one really knew what was going to happen there, but I just gravitated towards it and said, I'm interested in this.
Was CATIA one of the software? Because I remember that name being thrown around when I was an undergrad.
Yeah, so Digital Project from Coorey Technologies was CATIA. It was like an add-on, a skin over the top of it with some architecture tools.
I would love to see a study done on the impact of Coorey Technologies and CATIA on the industry, because they were so forward-thinking. Like what they did back in the 90s and early 2000s was like the seeds of what we're doing now, what's so accepted now in construction and in architecture. like parametric design and generative design, that they were really forward thinking. And you too, I mean, everything that you're talking about, this was back in 2006 to 2008, right?
Yeah, it was really early days. And yeah, like I remember seeing that technology and just saying, wow, because if you looked at CAD at the time, and I think we were introduced to SketchUp, that was like the latest tech. And I was just looking at it, and you look at the stuff that Gary was doing, and is like, to get to that level of complexity, what tools, and just to think, looking at different sectors and saying, well, the aeronautical industry, looking at airplane design, like they have to deal with that. Is a
Exactly.
very clever move to kind of just look to that technology and see what we could do.
Or even just the intersection of software and architecture,
Yeah,
because we all use it nowadays, but who would have thought that those two could like unlock this potential in the construction industry in design? They've obviously ridiculed for their designs and a lot of things failed, but they were kind of the guinea pigs for the industry.
yeah, and there was a really good group, and I kind of point some of it back to the Smart Geometry group, and I'm not sure if you came across them, but
I haven't.
yeah, so early on, when generative components from Bentley came out, there was a group of architects, engineers, computer scientists, software developers that kind of gathered together in a conference annually around the world. And we were exploring, the possibility of parametric design, generative design, using the generative components technology. And it was a great mixing pot to meet people interested in this space, and also to test out the latest tech. And it was quite cool. The team from Bentley were there at every conference, and I remember like they were doing builds on the spot with the participants, and it was a really innovative time. And yeah, I think everyone was just looking for, what are the use cases, what are the possibilities, how do we use this technology? And it came from all different segments. It wasn't just architecture, it was engineering, it was construction, it was computer science. And yeah, it was a great time for innovation.
And it's amazing that you stuck with that, and all your experiences led you to developing Archistar, because everything you just mentioned, the intersection of architecture, software design, and even engineering, all that is a part of Archistar. It's not just a software. It's much larger than just a software.
Yeah, it's, you look at generative design, and I think early days, you look at what was happening with parametrics and Gary technologies, and there was this kind of gravitation towards complex, bespoke, like super creative work. Where we landed at Archistar, and I did my PhD because I just wanted to keep learning and moving on with this technology and seeing what was possible. But where I kind of landed with a use case at Archistar was, it was not necessarily like the crazy bespoke architectural designs, kind of moved towards the everyday design. And then we looked at buildings like residential, commercial, subdivisions, and we just started to understand and decode the logic. And I think there's something deep in that if you study a building type or a building typology deep enough, you really start to understand all the rules, the variations, the options, and how that all comes together. So essentially at Archistar, it's super deep research into specific typologies and a lot of analysis of precedents and what's been done before, but then figuring out how to code that and turn that into a system where with minimal inputs, you can create amazing designs.
So for people who haven't used Archistar, can you create a mental picture of the process of using the software, like from the beginning to the actual design itself?
Yeah, it's actually pretty quick. So you basically log on to the software. It's all web-based, and you can think about it almost like Google Maps. So you come on, you search an address that you're interested in, or you just browse the map. there's all of these visual layers on there. So you're probably used to zoning maps. We've got maximum height maps. So everything's really visual on the platform, and it helps you find opportunities. Once you've found an opportunity, you click it. We then give you a summary of all the planning rules that relate to it: maximum height, floor area ratio, density requirements, setbacks. So you get all that summarized for that specific lot. Then you just hit design. And it's like simple button that says design. What do you want to design? Multifamily, subdivision, townhomes. Click it. There's a few input parameters that you might want to tweak. So we pre-populate it with the rules of the planning code, but you may want to experiment and try go a bit higher, a bit lower, and see what it is.
Then push those limits a little bit.
Yeah, push the limits a bit. Because it's still a creative process. It's still for negotiation. You might go a little bit higher, put a bit more open space. So we don't limit your creativity. And then basically you hit generate, and then that will then probably take about 20 seconds or so, and it will come up with about 20, 30, 40 options. We actually process thousands of options, but we give you like the 30 best options. So then on your screen, you're on essentially like a Google Maps. You've got your lot there, and you just click through 3D designs and can interact with them immediately. And you've got all the data there behind the designs. You can run feasibilities off the back of it. So it's really about fast tracking, finding that site, seeing what designs are possible based on the planning codes, and then doing that quick analysis that you can see sunlight penetration to the rooms, overshadowing, environmental conditions like natural ventilation into the different units. So really powerful tool, very quick, and it essentially bringing design to the masses.
And the software is not just for commercial properties. Developers for single family homes can use it too, right?
That's right. And it's been really interesting. I guess that kind of evolved during COVID, and it's kind of like this evolution. And I think we've talked about this, that it's never a straight path to the end of what your goal is. And we were looking at this when COVID hit, and we started to get approached by large home builders in Australia saying that, look, all of our display villages are closed. We can't show people what these designs look like. We can't get out to them. They can't come visit us. Like, we're looking for a digital solution. You guys are working in this space of putting designs on a map. So we started to work with them and started to look at what it would be like to put single family home designs on the map. And then what is the individual zoning and envelope and the slope of the land. So we really started to get into the details about what matters for a house design and what's going to shift the dial.
So if a property developer finds a really large plot of land, can Archistar help them decide how to divide that land and how to create paths around it, all around these neighborhoods?
Yeah, so one of the generators that we've got is, we call either subdivision or townhomes. So you can basically take a large lot, you can specify the unit or the lot sizes that you're interested in, and then the dimensions of those lots. So you might have specific setbacks for the homes that you want, road widths that you're interested in, and it will come up with like a series of options for how you would subdivide up that piece of land. And then you can test out home designs on it. So
I used your software in 2020 just to test it out. And then I recently used it again just before our call. It is extremely different. It is, y'all have made so much progress in less than 2 years. And this goes back to what you just talked about. Like, running a business is not linear, or developing a software. It's a back and forth. You try this one thing and it doesn't work out, you go the other way. And I guess that's the beauty of it, like to look at it in hindsight and say, wow, we came to this particular solution because of all these problems we faced and all these other options that we tried that didn't work.
Yeah, that's it's, I think if you look at where you want to go, look at where your vision is, and we want to build this, I think as long as you've got that in the back of your mind, that's where we're heading. The pathway to get there, like, it may not be like as straight as you'd like it to be. And I think the trap that people get into is that sometimes they don't want to release things or get things out to
Till
the
they're
industry
perfect.
till it's perfect. And you know, they say that if you don't release, your first version that's like, you're embarrassed by later on, you haven't got out fast enough. And I think that's kind of what that was our philosophy, that it's like, this is very unique tech, it's very difficult tech. There's a lot of challenges to overcome, but let's push it out there. Let's get it into people's hands and let's see what the response is, because it will guide you and it will take you in different directions and you'll kind of get there, hopefully in the end. But it was interesting because on that journey, you release things that maybe they're not perfect and maybe it doesn't solve everything, but you get the feedback.
Yes.
And,
That's
I
invaluable.
think it's super valuable, but you do have to have thick skin because there's a lot of negative feedback along the way. It doesn't do this. I'm not going to use it. This doesn't work. So whenever I got that negative feedback or those comments, or, I like to, but I think trained as an architect, you're kind of
You
used to
can.
that. It's like everything is a critique. That's not good enough. Change that design, fix that up. So maybe that
That's true.
prepared me for this journey. So maybe the
That's very
architecture
true.
degree was good.
I like on my videos and stuff, I kind of bash architecture quite a bit, but I also acknowledge the value of the architecture education. It, like you said, it teaches you how to accept criticism and find constructive criticism in all the noise. And it really, that iterative process in school where you design something, get feedback from your fellow classmates or from your professors, and then do the next iteration of it. That is extremely valuable while running a business too.
Yeah. And I probably didn't make that connection until now, but I think it is that kind of background and that teaching and like that training and education in architecture that you iterate and you make it better, and it's almost never complete. It kind of completes when you finish the project, but
because
like time runs out.
Yeah, exactly. But even for your final project, you still receive criticism, and
That's
then you're
right.
stuck with that nagging feeling like, oh, why didn't you tell me that during my first critique? But you have to accept it for what it is. But yeah, and so there was one thing I wanted to mention. I feel like your company did something extremely valuable over the last 2 years, and that is partnering with all these other firms in your software. I didn't see that when I used your software in 2020, but I definitely see it now because y'all have developed this amazing interface and y'all are experts in the parametric design, generative design. But when it comes to plot layout or codes, and why waste time developing all that from scratch when there are other resources out there, other websites, other companies that you can partner with? And that's what y'all have done. I think that is the key to the power of Archistar.
Yeah, it's a good pickup. And we, from the start, we looked at it, and you, as a startup, you're growing this business and you're building stuff, and you have to pick your battles, and you've got to look at what are we good at? What can we do the best that no one else can do? But then what else is there in the process that's already out there that can augment that flow and what we're doing there? So very early on, we started to look for these partnerships and to see, because you talk to your customers and it's like, what's your process? What are you doing? What do you need? And we're introducing something into that process. But the more integrated you are, connecting in with all the right data partners that they use, and like there's no need to reinvent the wheel after time. So it's,
what are some of the companies that you have teamed up with and like information that you've integrated into Archistar?
Yeah, so if we're focused on the planning rules and the design and the feasibility, we've partnered up with great companies that do all the stuff around that. So if you need like construction costs, or you want to analyze what's happening in the market, so what's sold recently, what's the trends, what are the suburb trends, if you want to look at, we teamed up with Nearmap on high res aerial imagery, and they're a really cool company that's high res aerial imagery, but they're using AI to detect features on the ground. So you can start to extract out the geometry of the surrounding properties, trees, all of that stuff. And all of these things that these great companies are doing, we find ways to partner with them, but also integrate and enhance what we're doing. And a lot of it is, there's R&D there, there's product development. By looking at what we're doing and what they're doing, often new things come out of it.
Yeah. So there are other competitors to Archistar currently available to people in the US too. What's your pitch to people to use Archistar instead of them? What's the advantage of Archistar?
Yeah, so I'm friends with most of our competitors, so I think it's a friendly space, and I think we're all progressing to move the cause forward, which is great to see. I'd say what we do differently is number one, we're web-based, but we're connecting the data to design. And there are companies that are doing one part of the process, either just generative design, just planning data, just selling out the property with interactive models at the end. I think the key difference that what we've got is we've decided to build this out as a platform that follows through the stages of the process. So we start with planning data, digitize that, provide insights. That seamlessly moves over to feasibility and design, which seamlessly moves over onto the next stages. And that connection all the way along without having to switch software is super powerful. And it's probably cost us a lot more money to build out the platform, and it's a bigger play. And it's kind of interesting because, as a startup, everyone tells you, pick the one thing you're good at and just lean, just do that, solve that, and you'll do really well.
But you chose to ignore that advice. Yeah.
It's like, so we went broader, and we put pieces together, which means it did take a lot longer. And you saw the platform a few years ago. It took a lot longer to get the pieces of the puzzle together, but I think
it's more robust now.
It's more robust now. The power's there, and it's easier to build up upon now.
Yes, and you have some pretty exciting news. You've teamed up with a Canadian local government on,
Yes, yeah. It's been really exciting, and I think this is the power of the platform, that connecting planning data and rules to design.
That's something that hasn't been done before.
No, it's very unique, and the government has started to take notice of that. And it kind of started with the Australian government, they were really forward thinking, which was awesome to see. They said, look, if you can combine the rules and the designs, can you analyze existing designs that are getting submitted to council? So we started building both 3D and 2D tech to say, if you've not only can we generate a design, but if you load up your design, can we analyze that against the rules and give you a tick or a cross to tell you, is it going to pass, those planning codes? And we're currently doing some R&D work with in Canada as well. I can't tell you too much details, but it's super exciting, and we're looking to start rolling this tech out in the US as well. But
that's very exciting because everyone's complaining about permitting delays and holdups and labor shortages. So if we can automate at least the initial stage of the process, maybe we have eyeballs on it at the end to sign it off at the last stage. But the initial stage if you could automate all that using your platform, using your software, why not do that?
Yeah, and I kind of look at it like almost like a pre-check. Yeah. Like if we can give you almost that pre-assessment, and it's like tick, tick, cross, cross, where to look, and you focus in on the right parts of the puzzle. So it's now we're super excited by it. And
so what's the future goals for Archistar in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so as we expand out, like where we launched this in Australia, we got national coverage. We've made really amazing traction there, got product market fit. We're really focused now on expanding our regions. So US, Canada, we're kind of focusing in on the countries that the planning rules are similar. and we can adapt the technology and it makes sense. So the first is geographic expansion. And then we're moving into like the compliance space, so I think working closer with government, we've got industry already using the software, and we're going to tie that into government, and then hopefully this beautiful connection between industry and government, and maybe no one complains about the speed of development applications and everyone's happy moving forward. So I think that'd be a good outcome out of it. But I think if we look at that and say, that's where we're heading, I think that there's always things that come up. So it's kind of like, that's where we're heading now. But I'm sure that it's really interesting as you launch out tech and you provide solutions and products and people start using it, just different ideas come out of it. So you kind of never know where it's going to lead or what's going to come out of it. But you kind of instigate discussions by putting the technology in people's hands.
Like what you did working with local governments. You didn't know that this is what Archistar was going to be doing, but you just instigated that conversation and said, hey, we have this powerful platform. What if it could do this for y'all?
That's right.
And they were interested in it. So that's
and
an
quite often
expansion.
it's sometimes the idea doesn't even come from us. Like they'll come to us and say, hey, like we love what you're doing. Can you do this? And it's like, wow, that's a good idea. So stay close to your customers and listen for the good nuggets of gold.
But thank you so much for explaining Archistar. But before we go, I have to ask you, you have managed to carve a path outside the typical architecture field. Like you didn't just go down the path of becoming a licensed architect and like working at an architecture firm. You'd started this company pretty early on, and you found a niche, and that had a lot of potential. And you built this amazing company, and you have this really powerful vision, and you're going to grow it into this company that could really help the industry. What advice do you have for students still in undergrad or still in grad school in the architecture field, like to go down a similar path or maybe find their own path?
Yeah. So I would say that it's really about following your passion. And I was really interested in technology and where that could lead. And even when I worked for architecture firms, I did become registered. So I started going down that path. And when I worked for architecture firms, I would do projects, but I'd look at how can the tech help speed up my process. So even like in the context of normal architecture, and like working on projects, I'd always be looking at, can I introduce 3D into this? And can I do that? And the trick is that it's not part of your job description. Like, so no one's going to ask you to do that. So you've got to take the initiative to do it. And most of the time you've got to do that in your own time. You've got to go above and beyond. And it's like, I'm going to go the extra mile and demonstrate this. And I'd just say that it's probably going to be hard. If you're moving the dial, you're going to try something different. There's a lot of people that are going to say, nah, that's not going to work. Don't do that. So you have to have like you got to stick to your guns. You got to be super passionate about what you want to do and driven to do it. Because there'll be plenty of people to say, why are you doing that? Like, don't worry about that. It's a waste of time. Like, just focus on what you're doing. So you can change the direction that you want to go and you can carve out your own path, but you have to do it. Like you've got to be driven to do it. They're not going to do it for you, especially if it's outside the norm, So so just be driven, be passionate, and just know that you'll be challenged along the way. But if you really believe in it, then go for it.
That's really good advice. Thank you so much, Ben, for explaining how Archistar works and for that nugget of wisdom too.
Thanks, Belinda. It's great talking.
Talk to you soon.